Welcome to the Jerome McClain Show. I'm your host, Jerome McClain, and let's get into our episode.
Intelligentsia, the endem of sarcasm, the nutty professor to your whack-ass marmalade. It's T-Bone from T-Bone and Chick Brew in the morning. Now available in podcast format. Simply search for the T-Bone and Chick Brew podcast, available wherever fine podcasts are sold.
Welcome to the Jerome McClain Show. I am the host, Jerome McClain, independent media. It won't reinforce tribalism. We have one world. Nobody is leaving, so let's reason together. I think I messed it up. I think I'm actually supposed to say we have one planet. Anyway, I got an amazing guest today. So the wonderful thing about Jiu Jitsu is it lets you meet people from like all around the world. The next guest, I would always pass by him because he was in the 5 a.m. class and I was in the 6 a.m. class. And I knew he was a lawyer. And I also knew that he was intelligent. I did not know that his religion. And I came to find out later, and it amazed me for some reasons. Well, you'll find out during the show. But I'm going to give him his introduction. So he is a Jewish Israeli American. He grew up in the Midwest in the 80s and 90s. He traveled to six times, mostly with a family there. Most of them live within 10 to 15 miles from Gaza. His biggest hobbies are Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, going to the gym, reading, podcasting. He's married with kids, and he's a lawyer. He litigates business disputes, and he's been on the East Coast since 2008 and the DMV since 2022. Let's welcome our guest. You can start talking now.
Hey, good morning. Great to be here.
It's great to have you. I guess before we get to the meat and potatoes of how we got here, I wanted to basically let you, in your own words, kind of describe what made you interested in even coming on the show.
Yeah, there was a Facebook post. I think you're sharing a Substack article. It had to do with the Iran war and the Israel's involvement, the U.S. involvement. So I just wanted to give you the chance to talk to somebody who is Jewish, Israeli, that has that perspective and hear that side out.
Yeah, and you know what was amazing, guys, is I had been wanting to ask him questions for months because I knew he was on a different side of the thought than I had. And out of respect for him, I didn't do it because I'm going to be very frank here. I don't like when people ask me questions about black people. And I always say I'm not like the king of black people. I find it offensive when people do that. And so I was, as a way to kind of treat people how I want to be treated, I just never asked. So when he asked me, I was extremely excited. And so I just want to start off by just telling us a little bit about like your childhood, your upbringing.
Yeah, so I grew up in the Midwest. It was the 80s and 90s were a really good time, I think, in terms of the Jewish experience in America. I think everybody, I always felt very welcomed. Yeah, the very first time I remember anybody even saying something that was remotely anti-Semitic, which I didn't find anti-Semitic at all. It was a neighbor kid, and he said to me, he goes, you know, you guys are so, and I don't think he meant this word pejoratively. I think he meant it as more like average, but he goes, you guys are so mediocre. I always thought Jews were rich.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they're just regular. You live on our street. And really, you know, the 80s and 90s, I really felt like we're very much that way. There was, while I was in college, I was in grad school, and, you know, kind of the first time I got the taste of, you know, a real dislike for Israel, was in ran for 9/11, and it was I remember it was a professor, and she says, imagine what this must be like for the Palestinians who feel like a 9/11 like this every day, and it was. I couldn't help but feel like I was in the upside down when our people were the ones who would get on a bus or go to a cafe or a pizza shop, and then a suicide bomber would blow them up.
Yeah, that's so crazy. And, I got a lot of questions about that, but I'm gonna table it for a second. I was born in 1984. Am I closer to you? Because I know you're like.
Yeah, you're fairly close in age.
Okay.
A little older than I am.
Okay, perfect. I'd say a little younger or a little older?
You're a little younger than me.
Oh, well, good. I'm happy that I'm younger because I don't say this a lot, guys, but this guy's smarter than me. So if he was younger than me, I was gonna feel kind of bad. But so
you're more advanced than me.
But it's just that I have a what you call it? I have what they now call high functioning autism. They didn't know what it was when I was a kid, and it's hard for me to sit still. And so, in order to have the nervous energy controlled, I just read a lot. Like even normally when I'm recording a podcast, I can't sit still. I'm walking around the entire time. But I got a question about the kid saying the statement and the professor saying the statement. I just find it very mind-boggling because a child will say something and it's sweet and innocent, and you would think a college professor would know better. And I find myself shocked sometimes that out of the mouth of babes, they're smarter than some adults who should know better.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think college, I think academia has gotten pretty badly infected with the kind of third worldist oppressor viewpoint that automatically, no matter what, if somebody fits into who they view as the oppressed category, they're right about everything.
Yes,
and can't do anything wrong.
And I think I have the same view, is that they think everything is binaries, left, right, liberal, Jew, Palestinian, whatever, Israel, Russia, and Russia, Gaza, and I'm like, no. These things are more complicated. This chess piece over here affected that chess piece over there. And I think what it is, and this is, I'm not trying to attack teachers, but I noticed this when I was in Florida. I was privileged enough to be raised by my great grandparents. I grew up in a home where everybody in my house was family. My great grandmother was there. My grandmother was there. And so I got to experience the joy of always being educated and always going to private schools. I really believe that the problem is that rich kids get taught and poor kids get tested. And a lot of it is ignorance. And in my state, which I come from, the great state of Florida, which that's kind of a joke because Florida's awful. but I noticed the disparities early on, like the things that I would have that just seem normal, like some of my closest friends didn't have. And one of the things are education. And I would think, like, if education is supposed to get people to the future, then why do I know that that's an F school? Because I can read it in the paper and that's a D school and that's a C school. And we think that those kids are going to grow up to do what? Because when they got their diploma, but everybody knows that their diploma came from an F school, and then it's those people are kind of the ones that, in my opinion, make the most negative comments, because they weren't. I don't even think it's out of hatred. I think it's out of ignorance. And it's. I think it's like a similar Sikh same. We pick presidents like we pick beer commercials, and they don't realize, like, this isn't a sport. This is life. It's very complicated. Do you think I'm on to something with that?
I think you are, and it's actually, one of the causes that's closest to my heart is school choice. In Florida, actually, of all states, has taken a huge leap there. They now have an $8,500 per child voucher program. You can send your kid to the public school if you want, or you take the $8,500 voucher and you send your kid to whatever school you want. And
Wow, that's great.
I think that's the way of the future. I really, in my heart, one of the things that I really wish would spread more in the country, because it's completely unfair that that people have to be stuck in the school that if it's not doing well, let there be competition. Why? And the state doesn't lose out. The $8,500, they would have paid more to educate the kid in the public school than that $8,500. So they save money actually, and the parents, they get the chance to choose. So I really think I agree with you there, and I feel the worst for kids that are just stuck in bad schools and there's nothing to do about it. I send my kids to private schools, and frankly, I don't know what the public schools here are like. They're probably reasonably good, but for religious reasons, I want my kids to have a Jewish education, and everybody should have that opportunity. Though people that want to send their kid to a private school should be able to take.
It's funny. You're speaking my language, because I think of what it is, and I like I said, I sometimes. I get muddled language up because I'm trying to speak fast, so I'll just say colleges when I should say some colleges. So I'll say, like, I think that what happened when I was growing up, there was this really anti-religious fervor that shot through the schools, and it seemed like it was always this battle between. So when I was in Florida, it went just like this. It was the gay stuff, and Matthew Shepard had just gotten killed, and then so we had to have conversations about hate crimes legislation. Then there was a Tina Brandon thing that happened, and then we were about that, and that's when I started to see the conversations in the country start to shift. Then it was, can gay people be in the Boy Scouts? And I grew up listening to conservative talk radio, not knowing what it was. My day, like literally as a child, I grew up, first person I would hear would be Bubba the Love Sponge, followed by Neil Bortz, followed by Bill O'Reilly, followed by Rush Limbaugh. I didn't know who these people were, but I just would always say, and then I would go out in life, I'd be like, well, I haven't even seen a gay or this, or what are they even talking about? But I started to think that the narratives were starting to be created even when I was a child, because a lot of the things people say now, I don't even have to debate the issues. I'm like, they were saying that when I was 13. It wasn't true then. It's not true now. But to jump back to what you said, I've always been very fervent about school choice, because when I was in Florida, if you were homeschooled, all homeschool kids got to pick which school they wanted to play sports at, because they said it wasn't fair to punish a child that they can't be on a sports team because they are homeschooled. And I was shocked when I came to the Commonwealth of Virginia, and I don't know if it's changed now, but if you were homeschooled, you couldn't play sports. I was like, that's how is that fair? I said, this is supposed to be a free country. How can you're going to tell me if I want my child to participate in a sport, I have to give you their brain? And the people used to always say I'm a radical. I was like, no, I'm not a radical. And I say, God made this world and everything was free. Why do I have to get a license to fish? Why? So I'm always like, once you start allowing them to do one thing, they kick the. So I used to, when what they used to call the crazy religious right people were fighting for stuff, I would be like, oh, good, let them fight, because they're on the right side of the issue in this thing. But I think it was a lot of the teachers were secularists. They didn't talk about their religion, but I just could pick up on they were mostly atheists, and so that was a fight that they were having without ever saying that was the real fight. But what I want to ask you is, when you were growing up, was your childhood like a politically, religiously, or culturally Jewish?
Yeah, it was. I wasn't as devout as I am now at that time. But yeah, absolutely. We were very, always. My father's from Israel. He wasn't born there. He was born actually in Casablanca, Morocco, but his family fled in the mid-50s. to Israel. And, he came from a big family, 10 brothers and sisters, and, almost all of them lived there, and their kids, and then their kids' kids. So the bigger part of my family is over there. And, I got to go there once as a kid only, and then, kind of as a teenager, adult, went quite a bit more often. But yeah, very, very much a proud Jewish home. And like I said, I certainly wasn't living among many other Jewish people, but it didn't feel weird. There was a little bit, felt like a little bit of an outsider, but not much.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Has anybody ever told you you were over opinionated? How about this one? You can talk about everything you like, but don't talk about religion. Don't talk about faith. Don't talk about politics. My name is Jerome McClain, host of Jerome McClain Show, and I want to introduce you to a show called Over Opinionated with my friend from Southwest Virginia, Josh Scott. Josh has always been told he has been over opinionated. He always tried to hold back these opinions, but he tried to back them up when he had to say something with facts and logic. Since he's grown up in many ways, he had to change a lot of his views and his opinions, as a lot of people should. He's not a millionaire from Fox News or CNN. He's just a hard-working, blue-collar type of guy. Give Josh Scott a shot at Over Opinionated with Josh Scott. You can find him on patreon.com/overopinionated at 679. You can also check him out on Twitter at NRV_guy79. Overopinionated with Josh Scott, where he is this soft-spoken guy telling you the truth. We talk about a lot of serious topics on this show. One very serious topic is women's health. One company that stood out to me was vslay.com, because the owner is very transparent about her own struggles in the women's health department and has great customer service, great deals, and frequent sales. You can check her out, her great customer service, products about women's health, and frequent sales at www.vslay.com. That is www.vslay.com.
I got a question for you, because I don't want to skip over it. You said something in there, and you said your father had to flee. Would you tell us? Do you know why he had to do that?
Yeah, so this is a thing that people that are from that part of the world don't know much about. There's a thread, and obviously this is not universal, but there's a thread in Islam that is a very supremacist type thread that says, anybody who's not a Muslim that is living in a Muslim country, if you're a Christian, if you're a Jew, you're going to live as a dhimmi. I don't know if you've ever heard that word before.
Yeah.
It means second-class citizen. So that means you can't build your houses of worship, or if you do, they're going to be smaller and lower than the mosque. You have to walk on the other side of the street. You can only live in these, they call them mela. It's like the Arabic version of ghetto.
Yeah.
You can't, only Muslims can ride a horse. You have to be lower down. You have to pay a tax. You pay a special non-Muslim tax.
Yeah, they. It sounds almost like the Muslim version of apartheid.
Yeah, it is. And they're more or less, I guess, strict or severe. But it was always there. My family that lives there, they lived in the Mela together. And, it became the Jewish population of Morocco was probably peaked somewhere in around 250,000. And it was the population that lived there a very long time before Arabs ever came there, before they spoke Arabic in Morocco. There were Jews there speaking Hebrew. At the time of Carthage, there were Jews in North Africa because they could speak the same language. Are basically the same. So in any event, things got much worse in the 50s. There became a lot of very are anti-Jewish, anti-Israel sentiment in the Arab street. So almost everybody, not everybody, today there are probably 25,000 Jews living in Morocco, but to give you an idea, there were 250,000, and those 250,000 at that time have become more than 1 million people. And so there are more than 1 million people in Israel that are descendants of people who came there from Morocco.
It's crazy. You keep going. I want to hear more.
Yeah, so it's a big population that pretty much all left. It's the same thing all across what we now call Arab countries, which of course weren't always Arab countries.
Yeah.
Prior to being Arabized, like Iraq, for example, was Mesopotamia, was Babylon. It was
Yeah, that's what I tell people. I say when I read what I'm gonna. This is a conversation we'll say for. I want to have you on this thing 1,000,000 times, so I know I will save that question. But I always tell people there's a story in what we call the Old Testament where God tells Jonah, "You're going to go to Nineveh," and I say, if you look on a map, Nineveh is modern day, this, and I said it's either Iraq or Iran. I think if I remember correctly, it's Iraq. And I said, but most people they don't think about stuff like that. That there is no such thing as a land. I remember learning that there was one point in time when the Catholics were killing everyone, and the Arabs and the Jews had no nothing to do but help each other. And then I just said, but it's almost like it's a tribal nature that a certain group within a tribe will not like it the entire time. And then it seems like when some of the elders pass away, the youngers are the ones that start the beefs. And that's kind of a broad brush. And then because people are normally ignorant of the history, they'll just say, "Oh, this has been going on forever." And I said, "No, it hasn't been going on forever. It actually didn't start till this particular prime minister passed away, and then the next person that came in had a different foreign policy, and then the person that died on the other side, and but it's complicated."
Yeah. The thing that I think a lot of people don't realize is there were Jews in all these countries that we now call Arab countries.
Yes.
Obviously, Arabia has always been Arab, but these other countries, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Egypt, Libya, Algeria, Morocco, none of those places ever had Arabs in them. Nobody spoke Arabic. The Jewish people were there long before Arabs were there.
Yeah.
Now, were there people there? Yeah, of course, there were. There were Mesopotamians, there were Babylonians, there were Syrians, there were Aramaeans in Syria, there were Egyptians in Egypt, and so forth. But there were not Arabs. Jews were there long before Arabs were there. Today, you look at all those countries, almost every single Jew has left. Every single one of those countries has become completely driven out. Even countries with Jewish populations that reach back all the way to the Babylonian exile, like Iraq, for example. There have been Jews there since 586 BCE. Now, I don't think there are any. And there may be 10 to 20,000 Jews in Iran, and they've been there just as long as well. But, it's just, those countries have become, intolerable for not just for Jews, by the way. Every other ethnic minority has been driven out of every one of those countries. Christians, Yazidis, Assyrians, Baha'is, every the Islamic supremacists. That strain of it has driven out every other minority religion from their countries.
Yeah, my biggest prayer is this. First off, let me just cards off the table. I am one of those people that I don't believe in borders. I believe in freedom of travel. I think people, if labor can travel, that should be illegal. Because I just feel like if money can travel electronically and change the world, then so should people. Now, of course, I think every territory can say, well, this person has done this a lot of times, but so I am one of those people when I get on the news and they say, 8 million people fled through the United States. I'm like, good. I hope they're from these countries that people are getting driven out. And now the melting pot will get more meltier here. And now we'll be forced to learn each other. And what I'll say what frustrates me the most is like, okay, I sing karaoke a lot. One of my favorite bars is a place called Keegan's. What is Keegan's? An Irish pub. So were the Irish always welcomed in America? No. And then it's like we can keep going from there. And I was just like, so if we can just start with, we know the Irish were driven out. We know they weren't welcome here. We know they're welcome now. So how about we start with this fundamental principle? What is most personal is universal. So, and you just keep going. Somebody's in this country and they are from wherever. Oh, what happened? And that's how we, you know, you know, try to fix this problem. I asked somebody said something to me one day, and I know it came from a good place, and they said, "Do you believe that Israel has a right to exist?" And I said, "I actually believe that question is anti-Semitic." And he was shocked. I said, "Have you ever asked me, does any other country have a right to exist?" I said, "They're human beings. That's a stupid question." I said they have a right to exist just like you. And even if you had to ask me that, that's how bad it's got. And I said, yes, they have a right to exist. Do you have any deeper question than that? And I felt bad because I think it came from a good place, but I was so frustrated when I'm like, Israelis do not have to beg for a right to exist. They do exist. And
I love that response. I will push back on the borders thing. And
okay, let me go ahead, push back.
So you and I think, are both very devout religious people, and you know, if you look at the Bible, this is one of the things that's I think very unique about the Hebrew Bible.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when you compare it to anything else that's come before and even after, for that matter,
mm-hmm.
is, you know, when the Jewish people were, you know, left Egypt, you know, God says that, and even before that, when Abraham came into the land of Canaan, God says, okay, here are your borders. These are going to be the borders of your country. And so the idea that, okay, you're a people, you're going to have a people, and they're going to have a border, and they have a country, and those borders should be respected both ways. You're
mm-hmm.
not meant to go expand out beyond your borders,
mm-hmm.
and other people aren't meant to invade your borders. And I've put, you're not the only people I put on earth. I've put 70 different nations on earth,
mm-hmm.
and every single one of them has their place, and there's a reason that I you know, made people the way I did, made different nations. Not everybody's the same, and I don't want a grand, you know, Roman Empire or Babylonian Empire or something like that. I want people to have, you know, they're separate countries and they're separate peoples, and there's a reason for that. I think that's so different from, you know, all these empires that have come and gone, and frankly from, you know, a lot of these universalist ideologies, communism, and you know, those kinds of things, that where it's like, well, we have the best idea, and we're gonna share that with everybody, and everybody is this universalist impulse. You know, on the one hand, it's very understandable that you say, well, gosh, we've got the best ideas. Why wouldn't we share this? We'd be selfish not to share this with everybody.
Yes.
But, you know, on the other hand, I don't think that's God's plan. I don't think that's what God wants. God wants, there are different people with different priorities in different countries, and there should be borders, and there should be, you know, the nations should be able to decide for themselves what kind of nations they want to be. And, you know, the U.S., I think, is very different from most countries. U.S. is a country that you can come to from somewhere else and become American. You know, it's not like, you know, if you or I were to go to France and move there and live there forever, we don't become French. But, you know, somebody from France could come here and become American. Somebody from Nigeria can come here and be American. And it's just a different concept. And I love it. I think it's a great concept.
I think that is a topic that I would actually us to come back on and talk about more broadly, because I kind of agree and disagree at the same time, and I think it's rich. Hold on one second, guys. I live. Everybody knows I live on Ocean View. There's planes flying by. Hey, hush. Yes, hush. All right, so you guys, you missed our vicious chihuahuas protecting us from the airplanes that flew across. But before that would happen, I was saying I would actually like to have him back on to talk about this topic, because I agree and disagree. When I think about my religious context, I think about it like this. In the original plan, God gave us everything and literally said, you can have all of this, you just can't eat from this tree. And we literally only had one rule, and we had to modify it because we disobeyed. And then one of the prophets came and said, okay, we're going to give them 10 rules. And then that was God's giving us another chance. And not all of us, but a lot of us broke all the 10 rules. Then another prophet said, give them the entire book of Leviticus. And not all of us, but a lot of us broke a lot of the rules. So I think God's original design, which I wasn't there in eternity past, was no borders. That was the Garden of Eden. God, because of our disobedience, had to keep editing the plan because of us. And I think that's the conversation that we could have that would be long, it would take longer. And I think because of that, which you said about us being uniquely this and uniquely that, I think about there was one of the prophets who said something, and he was all alone, and God said, there are no 7,000 I have that have not bent their knee to Baal. And I kind of think you will always have the person in the tribe that says we can share with everybody. But that person is the idealist, or we may call it a prophet. The other person is the tribe leader, because he's better at operations. You know what I mean? He understands fully what that person says, but he knows that there's 7 years of toil, 7 years of rest, et cetera, et cetera. And so sometimes the idealists have beautiful ideas, but they don't understand the practicality of that doesn't work over here. And like I said, I think this is a rich conversation, because I said I both agree and disagree. So like, I don't even know where to segue from that. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, it's even if even if you were to take the Bible out of it for a minute and just say, okay, what's better? People to have most of their lives governed by a big government somewhere else, other than where they live, or have more the most amount of stuff governed very locally, and only very small certain things governed from far away.
Yeah.
I think most people would prefer, hey, the people that I'm near,
Oh yeah, I definitely agree with that. I definitely agree with that. And that was just what I was trying to. I often say this when I talk to people in like the behavioral psychology field. I said, you think that people pick the best decision? I said that wasn't the pick. I said they picked the best out of 3 bad decisions. And so I definitely understand what you're saying. I want to ask a personal question. Which person do you think in your family influenced you the most? And I only asked that because when we were talking, and when you brought up your grandfather, that kind of made me think about family.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, that grandfather I actually unfortunately never met.
Oh, okay.
He had my grandmother on my father's side, both passed away before I ever had the chance to go visit there. I'd say, one of the, obviously, parents are always going to be the most influential people on somebody, especially in their earliest days. But, as I grew older, one of my dad's brothers in Israel was particularly influential. He had become quite a bit more religious, and he also was dealing with an illness. He had lung cancer, and the guy just did not stop. He lived, like on just like one fraction of one lung. He's still, going around driving me places, and he really, the amount of, they call it in Hebrew emunah pshuta, like simple faith.
Would you pronounce that word for us one more time?
Yeah, emunah pshuta. It translates, I think, almost literally to like simple faith, like I don't know a better way to put it. Like just
No, that was look. I wanted you to say it because the second you said it, I felt it. We sang a song at a church I used to go to, and the song used to say it would just say, "The beauty of simplicity will bring you down to your knees. God, I love you because you first loved me." So that's why I wanted you to repeat it again.
Yeah. So somebody that lives that and you can see that in them, it's like, oh, and it would be somebody that potentially had reasons not to be happy with his lot, or you know, um, but you just didn't see it.
Yeah, that your he reminds me of actually my grandmother. She was a radiologist and ended up getting cancer, and she was cheerful the entire time. And even when she was going through chemo, they told her she was going to pass away, and she literally told me, she said that she heard a voice from God, and it said, "No, you're not." And they said they had taken all the tests, and she said, "Well, I just heard a voice. Go take the test again." And then just because she had worked at the hospital, they scheduled everything, came back and did the test, and when they scheduled it the next week, the cancer was gone. And so,
Right.
and she's 75 years old now. It was breast cancer, and that's the person that most influences me. I kind of think it's funny when I have this radical view because my grandma always tells me, "Oh no," and she'll be getting on her little rants and raves, and she said, "I refuse to believe that just because I'm a Democrat that Republicans don't have something to say." And I said, "That's where I get it from, huh?" I think it's just a beautiful upbringing. Staying to that, was there like uh, a teacher that kind of had the same influence on you?
Probably one of the most influential teachers I had was my first judo coach, who this would have been kind of the late '90s, college judo, and it just he was a very influential guy for ways that I don't know if I can articulate on the spot, but I think when you start martial arts, I know you started much younger. I think you were in wrestling. So
Yeah. I was my granddad was a boxer, and he was the warden of the juvenile justice center. So he kept us active. So I was on the swim team, gymnastics, taekwondo. There was no judo because I didn't know that exists. So it was taekwondo, and then swimming team, wrestling, baseball, and then cross country. So
yeah.
I was like a multi, always doing something.
Yeah, and I didn't have any of that. I really judo was the very first real organized sport I got involved in. It was my freshman year in college, and I never stopped. I've never been off the mat since then.
Oh, nice. Yeah, man. See, it's great. Like even though you started later, yeah, we still we met each other, on the way there. So it's like sticking to that, like because we both met each other through Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. Do you have like a professor, coach, something that had a impact on you? And I want to think about like what type of student were you? Were you like the rebellious student, the wanted to learn student, or you know?
No, I've always been the wanting to learn student. Be focused. Every.
God bless you. I was the pain in the ass student.
Yeah, so I mean, if we're talking about jiu-jitsu or school, it's really the same. Always want to learn, focus, and pay attention. And every single coach I've had has been incredible. When I went to law school, I actually been out in the world for several years first, and when I went back to law school, it was just such to be back in academia and have the job of just learning all day. And I had so much gratitude that the ability to be there at that time.
So what made you want to, I want you to continue, but I also want you to know the next question is going to be like, what made you want to be a lawyer?
Yeah, so it was, I had spent years out in the world. I was working in commercial insurance, and it was cool. I liked it, really liked it. But I was at a place in my life where I was getting married. I was going to be moving. And that world was changing. The commercial insurance industry was changing. And so I thought to myself, I've kind of always thought about maybe being a lawyer. And so I said, well, let me take the law school admission test and see how I do. And if I do well, then I'll know, it's meant to be. And if I don't do well, then they'll know that too. So I ordered all the 30 previous law school admission tests, and just for a month or two, just did a bunch of practice tests, set timers, and did try to do as much as I could under the real time pressure situation, and to see how well I do. And I could tell from the practice tests that I was going to score above the 90th percentile. Some of them much higher, but when it comes to game day, you don't always have your best day. So my when I actually got in there and took it, I hit 90th percentile, which was good enough to get into a law school somewhere, where all the places we were looking. My wife was interviewing for residency as a pediatrician. And so we didn't know where we'd end up, but I knew that I was going to be able to get into a law school, one of the places we ended up. So that's what happened. She asked over Norfolk, so I went to law school, landed and married. And it turned out the timing was all really good. Rejection started when I started law school. And by the time I got out, things were starting to get a little bit better. And if you were real tippy top towards the top of the class, you could get a decent job. If you weren't, it was going to be a lot harder. You'd have to scrap a lot harder. But thank God that was.
Man, that's amazing to hear. My original job that when I used to think about that, people would always tell me I was very good at public speaking. I wanted to be a lawyer, but I wanted to be a constitutional law professor. Constitutional law lawyer, and it was basically. I kind of talked myself out of it. I started to think, what do you make? I have to get to where I'm going to make money, and then literally it went from wanting to be a lawyer, and I got really big into science and biology. Then my brain was like, oh no, how are you going to make no money there either? But it's cool that somebody actually didn't overthink it and shot their shot. Was there like a rabbi or a professor that kind of you looked up to that made you think about law school?
No. I didn't meet any of my law professors until I got there. Okay. And I've been out of school for like 8 years before that, so there was nothing really like that. It was more just, can I do this? And is this the best path forward? Okay. Like I said, I was going to be moving. I didn't know if I'd find anything comparable to what I was doing before moving. So the timing was just really good for it.
I wanted to ask you that type of question because me and you agreed to like an hour, and I told him we don't have to do this all in one segment, but I wanted to last question because there's a racist narrative, anti-Semitic narrative about all Jews being lawyers. That's why I asked, was there a rabbi or anything like that? So that was a loaded question. I asked that because I was trying to debunk a narrative, and that's you did it without knowing. That's why I asked the question. Like I said, it's already 10:49, and I know I promised you an hour. We may not record this, guys, but we may not post this one, but because we're gonna do it in many sections. But is there anything you want to say in the last 10 minutes, like about in any topic?
Well, if you still have questions, I'd say we still have about 20 minutes, so I'm happy to.
Okay, perfect. I want to because I was very fascinated with the fact that you were kind of how people who are raised in like a strictly religious home but are not religious and grow up and grow into it. When did your faith become more serious to you?
So there's a concept in Judaism called being shomer Shabbat, like a guardian of the Sabbath. Mm-hmm. And I always knew that I wanted to do that, and so I took one to a much lesser extent. I've always tried to avoid doing any kind of work, even homework, anything like that on Sabbath. But I knew one day I was going to be fully locked in and just be, everything goes on, and not private, all that stuff. And so before I got married, that's kind of like, okay, once we get married, that switch is going on, and it's going to be we're going to be Shomer Shabbat. And so that was kind of where I really became, I think, a lot more what I wanted to be always. And the thing about being Shomer Shabbat is that you have to arrange your life around it. Otherwise, it would be very difficult. So, for example, we don't drive. You can't start a fire on the Sabbath. Mm-hmm. So, your internal combustion engine, among many other reasons, you wouldn't be able to drive. We don't drive on Sabbath. So, you've got to live somewhere that's walking distance to your synagogue if you want to go, to services on Shabbat, on Sabbath. And so, that's a big investment in a lifestyle, is to say, okay, here's the synagogue I want to go to. I've got to find some place within a mile of there to live. Wow. But yeah, that's to me one of the biggest and most rewarding parts of my practice is Sabbath. I mean, it really is. If you've never done it, it's hard to explain how it's like an island in time. You have the week, and you have everything you do, and all the running around, getting to the gym, getting to work, going to court, everything you do during the week. And then you get to Friday, and as once the sun goes down, all that's over. Everything's off. You're not going anywhere. You're not calling anyone. No emails. No TV. It's all just you go to services. You spend time with your family. You have nice big festive meals together, almost like a Thanksgiving.
Look, you keep talking. I'm gonna be converting pretty soon.
You have guests over, or you go to other people. It's easy because you all live in the same neighborhood. Because otherwise, you wouldn't be able to walk to the synagogue.
And can I ask you a question?
Yeah,
I'm in a community. I'm in and out, but it's a Reform religious community, and they have intense debates all the time about what date is actually the Sabbath. In your religious practice, what day do you guys say is the Sabbath?
Saturday.
Okay. Yeah, we have some people they'll say it's Saturday. Some people will say it's Friday at this time, starting 6 p.m. Some people say it's Sunday.
Yeah. No, we do start Friday night. So it starts Friday night at sundown until Saturday night.
And even my grandfather, I was raised African Methodist Episcopal. He had a thing with 6 p.m. and he would say, we had a game room in our house, and they were saying he would say at this time, 6 p.m. He say none of that. He said we do not play games on Sunday. Now he didn't. I don't know about it. I don't. I never asked him, well, grandfather, why? But even he, we just knew there were no games on Sundays until sundown. You could not go in that game room. Don't even think about it. And he would say, no. He said because we don't play pool on Sundays, and I know if you go in that game room, you're gonna say you're playing your video games, and you're gonna. And so. Okay, I always kind of wonder, because a lot of times I think that, I'll just say this, Protestants interpret Jewish texts, and I laugh. I say, that's not what that meant. You've never met a rabbi and just asked him that. You've butchered that. But so that's why I wanted to ask you that question. When you experience, so let me ask you a question too. There are so many different types of people who are in the Jewish diaspora. What is your specific brand of Judaism? If you did I phrase that question correctly?
Yeah. So there's different, I guess, lines. It's funny because we're such a small people. I don't know if you know how many Jews there are in the world.
No, but look, I just started to learn this because you remember. Look, I'm gonna give. You remember when George Bush was like, I thought they's all Muslims. That's kind of was me, Then I was like, oh, this is Ashkenazi over here, and this is, and this is, and I just like, oh, I just kind of just thought Jews and these people have been chased out of everywhere. And then recently, maybe as recent of 7 years ago, I started to kind of learn all the different ones. And so, yeah.
Yeah. So it's funny. There is there are Ashkenazi, Sephardi, Mizrahi. So those are kind of an accident of history, really, because it really is just one people.
Mm-hmm.
The people, they're called Ashkenazim. A lot of people say, "Oh, that's the Eastern European Jews," and that's a misconception. Those people, after the Roman invasion and conquering of the land of Israel and driving out most of the Jews, especially after the Bar Kokhba rule, a lot of Jewish people of all places ended up in Italy. And it's kind of the center of the Roman Empire, the center of the commercial world, and you might be able to start making something of yourself. And they spread to other places, including the place that they refer to as Ashkenaz is what you call the Rhineland now. It's kind of a border area between France and Germany.
Oh.
It had cities like Mainz, Worms, Trier. So those were the big Jewish communities of what was called Ashkenaz.
Yeah,
and those people, obviously times changed, and that area, they were driven out. So they looking for other places. They moved to Netherlands or Poland or Ukraine or different places, and so prior to World War II, probably the largest concentration, the places where the most Jews live. There's certainly quite a number in Netherlands and Germany and stuff like that, and France, but the bigger numbers by far had migrated east to Poland, the Baltic states, Ukraine, and parts of Russia. Although to call them Eastern European would be a misnomer, because they were completely isolated. There was no Eastern Europeans did not intermarry with Jewish people. And so the Ashkenazi Jews, they happened to live there, during the period, call it from like the 1700s till the Holocaust. So for that 250 years, that's where they happened to live. But they were by no means from there or up there, or and didn't really have any relationship with anybody that was. Didn't speak the same language. The Jewish people there spoke Yiddish, which is basically German, written in Hebrew letters and with a lot of Hebrew words thrown into it. Whereas the local people would have spoken Polish and Russian and Ukrainian and Czech, Latvian, and those kinds of things.
Yeah.
So it's basically just refugee communities that were having to be living there. That nowadays people, I think, misname and say, "Oh, Eastern European Jews."
Yeah, and I get you.
The Sephardim were people who live, Jewish people who live. One of the Spain had been a battleground between Christianity and Islam, and under both, a lot of Jewish people lived there, and it was Sephard is the Hebrew word for Spain. And so the Sephardim are the Jewish people who lived in Spain, and it became one of the bigger centers of the Jewish world. A lot of them, they all left, of course, after the expulsion of 1492. Many went to Morocco, which is where my family lived prior to moving to Israel. But yeah, this is Sephardim. And then Mizrahis are the Eastern Jews, so Jewish people who lived in countries like Iraq, Iran, Lebanon, Egypt, Yemen, and those people were probably those communities that I would say are the oldest of the diaspora, the Jewish communities. In other words, if you were a Sephardic person, who lived in Spain during a certain period from the let's say from 500 to 1500 roughly. Okay, well, these Jewish people have been living in Iraq or Iran. They have been living there since 586 BCE. But anyway, so that's kind of I don't know, what do you call it, ethnic or background.
Trust me, that was a question I always had, because I am so, I first off, I reject terms like liberal, conservative, blah, blah, blah. It's one of those, I just say, my family never discussed terms like that. And I don't even like those terms being forced upon me. One of my good friends is a conservative, and I helped him start a podcast. And he said, sometimes I hear your podcast and say, man, is Darrell a conservative or he's a libertarian? I said, Darrell has principles, and I just try to be morally consistent. And it's very difficult. But I realized when anti-Semitism started to pop up that most of the people I grew up liking and knowing and listening to were all Jewish, but I didn't know that there were different strands. I didn't even know, and when I was growing up, man, when I was with one of my aunts, as a family, the show we sat around and watched all the time, Seinfeld. We just thought it was funny. I didn't know Jerry Seinfeld was Jewish. It didn't come up, and then when I grew up, I had some professors I would listen to. Alan Dershowitz was one of them. Noam Chomsky was one of them. I didn't know they were Jewish. I didn't know anything about it. It didn't cross my. I just knew this was a very smart professor. This one is also smart. They disagree, and then as I got into some of the younger people, I was Ben Shapiro. I knew he was Jewish, but I would listen to Sam Cedar. I didn't know he was Jewish. David Pakman, I didn't know he was Jewish. And then it wasn't until this frequent rise in anti-Semitism when they started to talk about the different versions of Judaism, and I just kind of was like, okay, that's something I have to dig into one day. That's what prompted me to want to ask that question.
It's funny you mentioned this like recent rise in anti-Semitism. It seems like it's one of the favorite things that the anti-Semites like to talk about. Say, well, Ashkenazi Jews, they're Europeans, and they have no connection to Israel, and that's like, okay, they should go back to Poland, and it's like, well, it's like. Jewish people lived in Poland for call it 200 years, 250 years, but that was because they fled the places they were before that, and before that they fled the Rhineland. Before that they fled Italy. Before that they fled from guess where?
Somebody actually said that to me before, and I said, man, that's such a great point. I said, aren't you Irish American? I said, why don't you set the example? Get out.
Yeah. There is this. You and I were talking about it by text earlier. This very human tendency to make yourself feel bigger by putting other people down.
Yeah.
And it's so easy because there's no cost to it.
Yeah.
Like these people get up and they say, we're on this land acknowledgement. We're on the land of the mighty, Cherokee Nation, the proud people. It's like, how's that helping anybody?
But
you're
this
trying
is
to make yourself feel good and important.
This is kind of I don't want to be mean when I say this. I'm going to say it in a nice way. It is pointing at somebody else so they don't have to deal with the reason of why they're not successful. That's the nicest way I can put it. But because I didn't want to say some expletives of you're just a loser and blah blah blah, and maybe if you would have worked hard, but it's easy to point at somebody else of why I'm not successful, because it's harder to be existentially self-reflective. Like, did you have an opportunity that somebody gave you and you turned it down and you blew your money? Did you smoke pot and it's not like it's the end of the world? Like, there's things that you did that why you're not successful. And a blowhard will always show up because in order for people to win in politics, they always have to find an enemy. And Jewish people are just a very convenient enemy because it's such a small population of people. small group is being attacked, it's because somebody's already crunched the numbers and they know that there's not enough of them to fight back. And so a lot of it, I take seriously in the sense of I'm afraid for a lot of my friends, but I don't take seriously when the politicians are saying things like, I'm like, oh, he thinks it's just like a wink wink thing. And then I just kind of know uneducated people are going to repeat. So it's just the nature of tribalism is people just kind of follow the tribe. And I don't even. I was listening to astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson on some show, and he said people can't. He said it's not even. They don't mean to do it. He said, but if you walk in a room, he said the first thing you do is instinctually you look for what looks like you. And he says you notice if somebody's bigger, you notice you're also bigger. If you're the only big person, you notice that everybody's skinny. If you're the only black person, you notice that some people are white. If you're the only Jewish person, you know. And he just said, and it's natural to have that reaction. And sadly, tribalism becomes a reaction if there's an economic downturn. Instead of blaming, oh, we didn't do it, they did it to us. It's like, what? They're probably just as poor as you. And I sometimes used to say it is the lowly step of our origin. And when I was big into biology, I say, I mean, well, come on, we're half a chromosome away from being a chimpanzee. I can only expect so much. But when it gets to all the stuff, I mean, it's heartbreaking. I was bawling my eyes out for the last 4 days because I'm very loving person. I used to work for the Stand Up for Kids Foundation. I used to work at social services, and like I love these kids, especially adoption places where they don't have any place to go, and it's just I always, when I would think about these conflicts, I used to look and I say, can't you just see him as a father and see his wonderful family and his wonderful wife, and then look at your wife and your kids and start there, and my heart was broken because it was a universal almost no. And I didn't, I didn't know what to do. So,
I'll tell you, one of the ideas that I've been thinking about recently. I was watching this video about the origin of why people have different skin colors. And, it's a really simple. Really simple reason is people did not used to travel and go for a long time. People were whatever latitude you were from, you'd probably stay there most of your life, generation after generation. And if you were at a latitude where the sunshine was abundant and very direct, you would face the risk from getting too much UVB that you're going to get a lot of sunburn, skin cancer, and have all kinds of problems from that. And so you have a protective mechanism which it's called melanin, and the more of it you have, the more UVB gets blocked, the better protected you are against too much UVB.
Yeah, whereas that's a good look. I love that show.
Yeah, and if you're in a latitude where there's not enough, or at least at certain times of year, you're just way too indirect, and you'll never get enough sunlight to get your vitamin D, especially if you're like just bundled up in so many clothes and maybe like 2 inches of your face is showing. You need to have like way less melanin, otherwise you don't get the vitamin D, and you're going to suffer from all of the health consequences of not having enough vitamin D. And here God has put an unlimited free supply of energy that supplies everything we need, called the sun. Mm-hmm. And he's made a world that's big enough that you can have people in every different latitude, and he's given us this system for developing the right for developing the right level of melanin to either protect you from too much or let enough in that you'll get enough vitamin D. And you can imagine how he must be shaking his head when people from, that developed in one latitude that have a particular tone look at people from that developed in another latitude with a different tone that have the exact protection that God designed for them, and they say, "Oh, that person must be inferior because they look like this," or it's just
Yeah.
I feel like that's got to be insulting to God who made people that way for a super good reason.
Yeah, that's deep. I 100% agree with that. I 100% agree with that. I just want to keep track. So it's 11:10 right now. How long do you have available?
Yeah, why don't we wrap up for today?
Okay, so guys, we're gonna wrap up. I'm gonna let him have his closing statement. Just so anything you would like to say, and we'll let that be the end of the show.
Yeah, I don't think I can do better than I just did. So,
all right, guys. Well, goodbye. So now, unfortunately, if you notice something different in the very beginning of the episode, that is because I am so worried about anti-Semitism that we both agreed that it would be I would like to protect him and his family. So for the sake of when he comes on, which he's going to be a regular guest, I'm actually I've been looking for a co-host for a very long time, and so I'm going to offer him, to if he would like that position, because as you saw, very smart, very bright. I learned a lot. I agree with him on a lot of things. That's why I like to when I like to say the word Judeo-Christian, just to always link this country's foundation is not Christianity. It has you don't get to any part of that faith without starting with Judaism. So the notion that you should be anti-Semitic is stupidity. And I do think I'm gonna, I think I just convinced myself I'm gonna do some episodes trying to figure this out, but it's gonna be a while. I'm really gonna have to research it. But anyway, so for the podcast's sake, his pseudonym is gonna be Jacob Ben Salman. Jacob Ben Salman. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you on the next episode.
מישהו דואג לי שם למעלה, מביא לי כמה כוכבים והם נופלים אחד אחד.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Of course, if you want to support the show, you can do so by going to www.patreon.com and getting a membership for as little as $3 a month. Again, that's www.patreon.com/The Jerome McClain Show. The Jerome McClain Show is fully listener-supported, independent media that won't lead you to tribalism. Get a membership and support independent media at www.patreon.com/The Jerome McClain Show.